Hello friends, happy Sunday. So the topic of today's video is on blockchain technology and decentralization. And this is an area that I've been looking at actively for a few months now, and I'm getting more and more fascinated and intrigued by it. And I believe that what we're seeing coming out of this space is the future not only of commerce but also of governance society. I wanted to touch on a few different things that I've been contemplating, exploring, and researching. And what I'm really fascinated with more than anything else is what I see as the ability for decentralization to improve so many aspects of our lives. I mean, we as a society, we can do so much better, and we know that we're capable of it. We are capable of it. Unfortunately, through the last century, couple of centuries, we've been at the mercy of an industrial era model that was built on the assumption of zero sum game. So that is to say that in in the industrial era, it was the belief that wealth wasn't abundant, and that in order for one person to win, so whether that be to accumulate wealth or resources, it had to be at the expense of another person. And that's just not true. There are more than enough resources for everybody to go around, and we are not doing a very good job as a society of providing for all of us. So it's really fascinating to see the early stages of blockchain and to imagine what all we can do with it, because when we decentralize, we're taking the power away from the few and giving it to everybody, which which leads to more equality and more opportunities, and a so I don't want to say it's a redistribution, but it's a more fair distribution. So people are getting compensated for fairly compensated, that is, for their effort, as opposed to what the system that we have now that is remnant of the industrial era, where a few people, and not necessarily the people that are adding the most value, are getting way overcompensated, disproportionately overcompensated, while the vast majority of people are undercompensated. So this is a model that in developed countries, this is the only model that we've known our entire lives. So to imagine something different is a little bit difficult. We really have to take everything that we've learned about business, and for me and for a lot of you that went to business school, we have to take a lot of what we learned in business school and just like chuck it out, because that's not a lot of the principles aren't going to apply anymore. Like, for example, blockchain enables a new kind of organization called a decentralized organization. So there's a couple of different structures. One of them being the DAO that's being spoken of quite a bit, which stands for decentralized autonomous organization. So the DAO is like a company, but it's this organization that is run by a community of people, and membership to that community isn't limited by a gatekeeper. So, like for example, in a company, the gatekeeper is the recruiter or the HR person or the hiring manager, and that gatekeeper isn't limiting access or entry into the company necessarily based on merit. I mean, oftentimes it's politics, it's policies, there's discrimination. With a decentralized organization, anybody has the opportunity to join an organization as long as they are able to provide value. And and every single person has an equal weight in terms of voting rights to determine the direction of the organization or what be it, and the compensation is fair and transparent because it is controlled by a smart contract. And the smart contract, not only, well, actually, not just the smart contract, everything of the organization is public, publicly available and accessible by anybody. So one of the questions that arises with this is, well, if all, so let's take a company, let's take an example of, let's imagine a decentralized Uber, a ride sharing service that is run by a community as a decentralized autonomous organization. In it being decentralized, anybody would have access to the source code. So anybody could take everything from the company and copy it and go create their own rideshare service. So naturally, the question arises, if anybody can copy anything, any organization, well, how does anybody make money? How does any organization generate revenue? And the answer is quite simple. It's because the organization is only as powerful as the people who are running it. So people are naturally going to gravitate to organizations that have a very strong purpose, have a very strong vision, and are also fairly treating their customers and their workers. Now, I'm saying workers because I don't see the employer employee relation existing in this model. It doesn't need to exist because you don't have to be employed by a decentralized organization. You could actually just contribute one time, you can contribute every once in a while, or you could be a regular contributor. You'll be compensated in some sort of token. However, you don't have to be employed, so you actually have the freedom to do all sorts of different things, or just work for a few different organizations. But there's no contract beyond, or excuse me, there's no long-term contract. That is, so the decentralized organizations have to treat all parties, all stakeholders involved in a fair way in order to thrive. And that's where the power of these organizations will come from. It'll come from the network effect, from how many customers are attracted to, in this case, the rideshare service, how many workers are attracted to the organization. So we need to chuck out this notion of competition, because competition is an industrial age concept. It's part of that zero sum game. I mean, what competition says is, I need to be crushing it, and if I'm crushing it, my competitor isn't crushing it as much, or I'm taking market share away from them. Right? It's like the in business school. If you ever saw like market share represented by a pie graph, where XYZ company has so and so, and the other companies have this much market share. You need to throw that out. There's enough resources, enough work, and enough demand to go around. So this idea of competition is is actually kind of, in the way that we use it in the modern day economy, it's toxic because we become so obsessed with the bottom line, how much a company is making, that we don't care, or at least Wall Street investors don't care at what expense that comes at, right? If a company has to lay off 1,000 people and pollute in order to increase their revenue by so and so, just so that the stock price goes up by a very marginal 10 cents per share, that that's what's going to happen. And competition, in a very similar way, is a very myopic way of looking at the the success of a company. Why are we determining success of a company by market share, by revenue, or by profits? We're not taking into account the positive impact or customer satisfaction or even customer acquisition in many cases. So these are metrics that are actually better indicators of how an organization fits in society, because organizations don't exist in a vacuum. A lot of organizations like to think they do, like oil companies, where they keep the profits to themselves and they externalize the costs. And in this case, the cost being environmental costs, the cost of relocating people because the ocean levels are rising. Those costs are being externalized to society, whereas oil companies are internalizing a profit. So they like to think that they exist in a vacuum. But organizations do not exist in a vacuum. What a company does affects its workers and it affects its customers and community. So, so these are all better metrics to be measuring the success of a company by. And when we focus on those metrics, then decentralized organizations make a lot of sense, because an organization is only going to a decentralized organization is only going to last as long as people need it to. And once there's no need for it, the either because the vision of the organization has been fulfilled, or the organization has gone off the rails and is doing something that customers and workers don't stand by, then there are other options. So we're going to be seeing the rise of options, and the ability for people to actually choose the organizations that they want to do business with because they believe in the purpose and the mission of those organizations. And also, the people, us, will be able to choose which organizations we can work for that align with our vision and purpose and give us a personal sense of purpose. So there's this is just part of a very large uh, puzzle piece, and it's still a little bit nebulous. This is like early 90s internet, where we understand that this is a really big transformation. However, it's still in its infancy. It's still very early days. So it's going to take a while for us to really start seeing how blockchain is going to help us decentralize just about everything. And me personally, I'm trying to better articulate this. So it might actually take several videos to for me to become better at articulating this and conveying this information to you. Speaking of decentralization, there is a YouTube like website that runs on the Ethereum blockchain called D2. It's a it's very similar to YouTube, and I will be starting to post videos there. So once I have some content on there, I will post a link on an upcoming video on his channel so that you guys can go and check that out as well. And my intent over there is to be talking about blockchain and how it all fits in the grand scheme of things. So keep keep watching, stay tuned, and thanks for tuning in. Have a great day and go out and do something great.